I felt like Buzz Aldrin and Neil Armstrong and Michael Collins must have felt when they first got into Apollo 11 there, and actually it's probably more like Apollo 13, there were so many fuck-ups with it.
Within the first 5 minutes of the game, we were embroiled in virginity stories. If this is where it starts, where are we going to finish up?
They fucking hated us. So how did the conversation go around gathering this commentary team together?
I essentially looked around at people who I knew who knew something about cricket. I knew that Jason Hoyt had been a cricket umpire in Auckland grade cricket, so he knew the rule book.
At that point, actually, I was preparing to do a major movie in America, and I'd just been cast in that, and so it was a bit surprising to get a call from old Jerry, who I hadn't spoken to for quite some time, asking me if I'd like to be part of a cricket commentary team. But, you know, it put me in a real dilemma, because I thought to myself, well, here's my greatest love, cricket, or a major American film. And in the end, I chose the cricket. Probably the worst decision I ever made in my life.
How did the team prepare for this first ever commentary? Was there a meeting? Was there a plan? What happened there?
I remember there was one meeting. It lasted about 20 minutes. It was at the hotel room the morning of the game.
And that was my first experience of Mike Lane's propensity for wandering around nude.
We had no idea what we were doing, and it was very much a ragtag group of people who had little to no idea what they were going to do. And I think Matt Heath said, what if you don't know anything about cricket?
I was wanting to raise the issue with people that I really wasn't qualified to do this and was hoping to try and pull out.
And Jeremy said, well, what do you know about? And he goes, I know heaps of stuff about animals.
I do know a lot about animals. I was pleasantly surprised how much room was afforded to me to just talk about animal reproduction and husbandry.
I tell you what, if you've got someone who knows something about animals and they're on a commentary team, that's going to be quite useful.
How do you explain Lee Hart being part of the team?
Well, to be honest, that was an accident. So I was out drinking with Lee Hart.
If I remember rightly, I was having a beer with Matt Heath, and I think Jerry rang up.
And one of the other commentary members called through, who I tried to recruit.
Yeah.
And then Lee Hart said, who was that you were talking to? And I said, that was Lee Baker that I was talking to.
So I was having a beer with Lee Baker, that's right. And I rang up Matt Heath and said, do you have Jerry's number? Because I had a great idea for a concept of doing a sort of like a alternative commentary cricket kind of thing, you know.
And he said, what are you talking to him about? And I said, well, we're forming an alternative commentary collective. And he said, why haven't you asked me? And I said, well, I was going to ask you. That's why I came out to have this drink with you, which was not true at all.
And then I eventually got hold of Jerry, and I didn't actually, he wasn't there, but he put me through to Mike. I didn't know Mike at the time, so I talked to Mike and I told him my idea, and I can only assume he went to Jerry after that, maybe had a beer, and they talked about it, and from there they kind of formed into something more sort of tangible, I suppose, kind of more of an ideas guy.
So I ended up having to get him on the commentary team because it was an uncomfortable situation. So that's how he ended up on the team.
How did you define the roles within the team?
It was early that Matt was going to be doing animal facts. We kind of knew that.
Jeremy said, how about one person just does ball by ball, everyone else has to shut up, and then between that, you just go for it.
It was established pretty early on that Jerry and I would be doing ball by ball.
I was keen to do ball by ball as well.
You know, we'd do the ball by ball and that would be pretty straight, and the likes of Lane and Hart, etc. would provide the filth.
And it turned out Jace and Jerry would do the ball by ball. And they still do. They do a good job. I still wouldn't mind doing some ball by ball. Mike gets to do some sometimes. And, I think Matt may have even done some ball by ball. I've never done ball by ball.
Lee Hart said, you know, I know fucking nothing. And was like, well, you good with numbers? And he's like, well, you can be the statistician.
My statistical background and analysis meant I was going to be doing stats. I mean, there was no two ways about that.
Talk to me through the facilities that you broadcasted from for that first game.
Oh my God, it was the tiniest caravan in the world. It was so small. It shouldn't fit 4 people in it, but yet there was a 8-person commentary team in it.
That original caravan was haunted. It felt when you walked in there like some terrible things had happened in there in the past, and I understood it was related to commercial radio in the 70s. I don't know why we didn't do an exorcism before we started.
Getting into the caravan, I remember walking in that the first time, and I felt like Buzz Aldrin and Neil Armstrong and Michael Collins must have felt when they first got into Apollo 11 there, and they're going, "This is it, fellas." Actually, it's probably more like Apollo 13. There were so many fuck-ups with it.
What do you remember from that broadcast?
Nothing.
But within the first 10 minutes, it went dangerously sexual.
It was very exciting.
Within the first 5 minutes of the game, we were embroiled in virginity stories. And immediately I thought to myself, if this is where it starts, where are we going to finish up?
It actually reminds me of an experience that I had in 1991 in Pauanui, where I ended up, it was a very hot summer, and I was going out with a girl at that stage, and there was a lot of action under blankets in what was probably late 30s kind of conditions, and there's a lot of sweating going on.
Very similar to today, Jeremy.
I would say the reaction was a little frosty from other members of the media initially. In fact, I remember one of the members of the sort of internal media around the ground setting up two speakers right beside our caravan and blasting them straight in and saying, "No one's going to hear your broadcast," and then laughing as he walked away.
I certainly felt, and I think some of the other guys did too, there was a negativity from the rest of the media there, not just cricket media, all media.
Cricket is a very traditional sport. It's quite boring. Usually old, white, middle-aged dudes who'd been covering cricket for years. And then they saw a bunch of fuckwits turn up in Hallenstein suits with a caravan that was basically laden with booze. They fucking hated us going to the media lunch.
Disappointed myself trying to get in on the mid-game lunch, and I followed your tactics, Lee, of putting as many big pens as I could in my top pocket and trying to look as officious as possible, but I was booted out rather unceremoniously and unable to partake of the meatballs.
I don't know that they were massively aware of us at that point, but that certainly changed over a very short period of time.
They thought that this was a novel idea that might last one game and then we'd get sick of doing it. Little did they know that we would bed in for eternity.
Once you're in there, we said we're not getting out of here.
Quite genuinely, what I remember after that first game is thinking, I've finally come home, I've finally found the thing that I'm going to do for the rest of my life.
And we knew within the first 10-15 minutes this was a dangerous combo that would potentially had the potential to take off, and yeah, it did.
I do know a lot about animals.
We knew we were making history.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I guess the first question people would be asking seeing this footage is why?
What is the one thing that we could do that would annoy Brian Waddle more than anything else?
A lot of people would say that we did this purely to piss off the other media.
Huge outrage.